Hey, good morning. I am back with another video, and I have been up this morning working on scripts and modifying my scripts, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, so I know I wanted to finish doing some narrating work, but then I also wanted to be very organized when it comes to what's been going on in my life right now, and I'm trying to work towards creating a schedule that I'm going to be stuck with following. Okay, this is something that I feel like I need to do, and this is something I have done in the past. It's just that I need more help when it comes to being motivated, more so than anything before. Okay, because usually, I'm somebody who's just like, oh, I want to go dig into this, right? But I deal with a lot of mind collapses and negativity in my mind from being a victim of human trafficking and finding out all of this drama, right? So, I struggle sometimes, but I cannot allow my depression to interfere with my life goals. And so I would say that things like, laying the foundation, the Autodidacts 3-part series is an important thing for me in my life. And I cannot allow, this issue to interfere with my drive. So there's going to be times where I'm going to be down, and I had mentioned that I do have a very special diet, meaning like, I don't eat sugar. I rarely have sugar. I don't. I try to drink as enough water as I possibly can. And yes, I have been resuming my regular walks, and I have my special little places that I go to, to give me moments of comfort that I need. And it's important that I build myself back up again and get into the right mindset. And it's hard because, I feel like I uncovered a lot, and, the more you uncover, of course, I would say the more devastating it can be. And this is the reason why it's more important for me, so important for me to care for myself properly. And so, I'm talking about this issue when it comes to self-love or self-care in the moral research. Research. I keep saying research because it is. It is based on research. It's based on psychology. It is based on law. And I'm putting these two elements together in order to bring it to the state of California and hopefully spread it throughout the United States. And it's really for our own good. I mean, this is for our freedom. The reason why, we tend to not reach our goals in life is because we have interference of many people who, through their need to compete, maybe their negative feelings towards their struggles with jealousy or whatever, and they're the only person that they should be is held accountable for their accomplishments is them. Okay, but they have problems with projecting issues onto other people that they feel are successful or that becomes a threat to them. Okay, this is improper behavior. So people need to start taking responsibility for their own life and stop blaming other people for their problems. And this is what I'm saying, okay? This is a form of abuse, okay? So I don't want to go too much into this, but I do want to talk about what's been going on in my mind. Now, the message I got was that I have backed into the main source. The violators are humbled and they are cooperative. And this goes all the way back for me, specifically identifying Rex Laverne as an active participant in it, as well as the origins of this cloning program, how it got intertwined with the church system, and also how the churches, no, and this is not me trying to start an argument, but they did show hypocrisy in their establishments of doctrines throughout the years, and then claiming to be that other churches were different. We've even had some organizations that it highly encouraged, discouraged, I should say, reading other material that did not exclusively belong to their church, which shows hypocrisy. Okay, because it's basically working for the same operation. Okay, which is deceptive. Okay. And so, like I said, okay, when we talk about things like holy text, when we talk about things like the Bible, any kind of holy text, basically, the main purpose is it to live within truth and vibrate in truth, meaning like, because the truth is really all that matters. The truth cuts through confusion. Okay, so what I did was I unraveled all of this, and so now I believe the vibe that I get is that many of the churches, like I said, churches as well as the people who participated in this program are humbled and they are cooperative. Okay, because I do get the intuitive message that people are starting to think about the, ridiculous amount of, cyber harassment that goes online. I also get confirmation that people are willing to do something about it. I'm trying to, generate ideas. I'm even willing to work in that field if I have to. I don't know how my network is working behind the scenes right now, because I know there's been times where people want to ensure my employment, and so jobs get assigned to me. This is what happens in a lot of networks. Okay, I put it out there. They know what I'm interested in doing now, and hopefully they will be able to find something that's, within that line of work. And like I said, I can do a lot of different things, okay? But, right now the important thing is for me to get back to work. Now, and I think that this is important because, the issue of cloning, like I said, there has been people who have made or based their religion off of the cloning issue, such as, like I mentioned, the Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff like that. And this is one of the reasons why I'm talking about a new earth, okay? Not just for cloning, but for everybody, okay? Obviously, we cannot live in an enslaved this when I think about how much human trafficking, or how human trafficking is so common and so played out in most people's faces and normalized, okay, we have to realize that there's a lot of trafficked individuals. Okay, and that means that their lives are 10 times harder than it really has to be. It's a continuous struggle. There's a lot of depression, there's a lot of disappointment, and also the feeling of there is no reason to live when people are operating things behind the scenes and making and reducing your quality of life and thinking that they have the right to do so. So let me go on to something else. I get the message that my father's apparition is basically being seen everywhere, and then I, had mentioned that my apparition was being shown in the 1960s. I do believe that my presence was very, very common. Like, I was constantly being seen and possibly with my father during that time. And like I said, maybe I believe that this is the reason why I have such an attachment to things like, the British invasion music, of course, as well as other, musicians from the 1960s. But, I would say of all my music choices, when I need to feel like safe, or I feel I want to be in touch with childhood, yeah, I will throw on things like Simon and Garfunkel and these sort of songs. And I know Simon and Garfunkel is actually an American band, but things like the Beatles, these artists from this time period, I tend to gravitate towards. And then I remember developing an interest when I was in high school in this kind of music. And I know that people thought it was strange. Do I believe that it is a direct result of C.B. Berganza? Yes, I do believe, because when I think about how C.B. Berganza, who originally started off as Prince Alamehu, he started off, the British family took care of his education and provided, what I would say, like an exquisite type of education, like through boarding schools and stuff like this. So I am used to English finery. Okay, like I'm basically I'm basically somebody who is accustomed to these sort of things. And a lot of times, I think in adoptive families, you'll get this one kid who doesn't seem like the rest of their family. They might be more elegant than their rest of their family members. They may, be more prim and proper than the rest of their family members. And of course, this adds tension, in the family home. But this is an explanation as to why. Because, I used to wonder why too, because I know, growing up in my house, we would listen to, all kinds of music. My dad would listen to country music. I would say music like the 1960s contemporary music was mostly flowing through our house. And that would be in the time periods of when I was, first arrived at the Gordon family throughout, I would say, my teenage years. Okay. And then, of course, my parents, in the mornings, we would listen to the current music, like whatever was current at that time. So, like when I was a little girl in first grade and stuff like that, I remember listening to things like, I think it was Rick Dees in the morning. He would play the regular, current at that time, top 40 music or whatever. But, I pretty much grew up listening to, things like the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel. And, I remember I had an interest in Jim Morrison when I was growing up. So all of this sort of stuff seems very familiar to me. very familiar to me. And how could it seem familiar to me? Because my spirit was close to the earth at that time. Me hanging out with my dad, you know what I mean? That's the only thing I can come up with, you know what I mean? Because it is very odd. And then also I do feel as though, you know, deep down inside, because I was exposed to the British culture, that this is how I become, you know what I mean? And so this explains stuff. So when CB Brigade, Prince Alame, who was at an age where he was old enough and came to the United States, this is what he brought with him. You know what I mean? This, you know, a very elegant type person, or somebody who had like exquisite manners, and he must have seemed like a very odd person to most people. And you know I used to come off as very odd to people. You know what I mean? Especially, I would have to say, a lot of other black people, because you know I was often a target for harassment and being bullied by people because they thought that I was, you know, acting white. But I seriously, this is just how I talk. This is how I, you know, this is who I am. Anyway, so my dad's apparition, just like me in the 1960s, is being seen. We are a spirit travel, soul travelers. And this is an example and confirmation not only of the spirit living outside the body, but the importance of having strong family bonds. You know what I mean? Because it does carry on in the afterlife. I am going to be writing about this. And like I said, the moral research and moral reset is actually based on, what I said, secular laws, not religious laws. So that, there's a lot of things that I believe that things relating to psychology and stuff like that also does have some sort of spiritual connection. I really do. A lot of it does. Okay. But, when we think of, when we talk about, things like these sort of issues in public, I have to be sensitive to that. And so we describe these things like in terms of the medical industry. Okay. I don't talk about things that relate to anything supernatural or anything like that when it comes to things that relate to education. That's the best thing and the best approach, I think. But anyway, my trafficking experience is fully out in the open, and I'm able to discuss it with the public. This is an intuitive message that I get. I do believe that my issue has been widely discussed, not just through, content creators on YouTube, but, maybe through channels in private groups that I do not necessarily have access to. And this is one of the ways that gang stalking, gains its momentum, through these like private, covert, things, because obviously I can't just log in and join a part of the fun of the discussions that go on about me, right? But there are these conversations that go on, and how this sort of communication continues to thrive. So, I can't stop it. All I can say is, and people talk about people that are somewhat famous. You can't stop that, okay? But if you are communicating things to do negative things to an individual, I have to be realistic. People are going to talk about people, and there's nothing necessarily wrong about that. But if you are doing it to conspire against another person, do keep this in mind, okay? Because this is when you start, going into the you might step over the line of doing something that's illegal, and this is what I'm talking about. This is how human trafficking can thrive, is when you set things in place. I get the intuitive message that the reasons why most of the people get online and discuss this is because they're capturing my father's apparition at the time. I do get the message that my rights are being respected. Like I said, I've mentioned this before, but yeah, it does kind of bother me that somebody would, put me in this situation, and where I've been deprived of my rights for a very long time. So yeah, I do feel comfortable about it, and this is one of the reasons why, I feel comfortable enough about talking about it, and why I have decided this morning to, while I was working on my project, I'm finishing up editing one of my videos. And so I also wanted to do these in different parts. Now, I am going to be working on the human trafficking video. And I also talked about me perhaps maybe doing human trafficking education to, introduce myself in the community. Okay. And then, of course, I would expect to charge a fee if I do conduct a seminar. Now, this is just in case I do not have a job lined up by my soul tribe, okay? Because I understand that they work in underground, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, unless, of course, it's being done for some sort of reason to deny me of my rights, okay? So yes, it is legal to arrange jobs. People have networks, okay? They do, and they're highly encouraged, okay? But if you're doing it to, change my lifestyle, make me go into a religion, force me into a marriage, then that's when it becomes highly problematic and illegal, okay? But anyway, why I was wanting to, create this video for human trafficking, a part of it is already, designated to be included into the laying the foundation, me explaining what human trafficking is and the different kinds of human trafficking. And see, what I want it to do is, because I want to make this into a seminar, possibly, okay? Because like I said, I don't know where I am in the employment situation. So I want it to be able to use some of that information for what I would be presenting to the employer. So, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, if I was going to do this, how would I present it? So I would have to arrange a meeting for that to happen, and also create some sort of private link, that would be accessible through YouTube to be able to do this. Or, I could, bring the presentation along with me, but see, I don't have the necessarily tools to do that. You know how you like go through the little slides and whatever. So it might be easier for me to do that. And then I would just be present, so in case there was any questions and answers. So, that's one thing. Okay. And it's not just to introduce myself and explain human trafficking. It is also a way of me letting people know that this was my journey, this was my experience, and I can also then talk to, the business owners about what it is that I'm offering as an occupational engineer. So yes, I do get the feeling that I am creating a new and permanent movement with the new earth, and a lot of people are very grateful about that. Okay, so what other message do I have? Okay, so I was debating as to whether or not I should include my personal experience with human trafficking as it relates to cloning and churches into this video. Okay, and see, I'm trying to be as general as possible in the model that I'm making for the laying the foundation. I don't think it's a good idea for me to go into, I was, trafficked all my life and blah, 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 blah. Because people have already heard that, right? And then I also believe that my father's operation kind of leans towards the supernatural, right? So I'm admitting that for the presentation part of laying the foundation. I'm being general. I'm talking about the different ways that people can be trafficked, okay? When it comes to the employment, the one that I'm going to be using for uh, my presentation for, introducing myself to employers, I'm thinking, well, I could mention it a little bit, because I think, a lot of people do know about things like, MK Ultra. They know about Operation Paperclip, but I also do believe it's something that I could talk about, but kind of speak about it in general terms. Okay, like, letting people know that I'm a victim of bloodline targeting. Okay, and this originated, from when they started manufacturing babies, many years ago. I was someone who was already a part of that program, okay? So I can let people know these general things, okay? And let people know that, yes, my father was also a manufactured child, and also referred to as a burden baby. And now I have looked up the word burden baby, to try to see if there's anything online that talks about the history of these children. Now, we see pictures of these postcard children, okay? But I'm telling people that this is how it this is how it came out. This is how it originated. The churches have been working in covert ways for many years, hiding this, okay? And it's been a part of their program that they were, involved in with, things like Operation Paperclip and Nazi type agendas, okay? And like I said, do I believe some of these churches may have started off with the best intentions? Possibly, you know what I mean? But like I said, the thing is, self-interest always takes hold, right? And so we have people who may have been members of these churches that got greedy, you know what I mean? And then this is how this sort of stuff, gets out of line. So, it is what it is. But yeah, I am going to be mentioning this to in the employer version, talking about my personal experience. But like, I'm not going to go into, Steve Murray, and then it was Rex Laverne, I'm not going to, use any, well, I don't know if I should or not, just in case, who's to say? Like, somebody in this community, it obviously happened in this community, right? I can't deny the fact that it happened in this community. So, I'm just going to say, in 2012, I was working for an agricultural company or something along those lines. I want to be professional. Okay, I want to be professional and not, being pointing the finger, because this is not the point of it. The point of it is to educate people on this issue and these sort of illegal practices and workplace violations that affect many people's lives. You know what I mean? When you think about the quality of people's lives in the last few years, I think going back as to when, Rex Laverne was really on his like high horse. I would see a lot of videos, people talking about how they hated going to work, their life is miserable, blah, 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 blah. And the reason why they feel this way is because this sort of dark energy has been over people, for a really long time, and people feel enslaved. And really, I'm going to say that, if people have been getting assigned jobs through special networks, and especially finding themselves in jobs or industries that do not resonate with them, and then they talk about absurd things like work-life balance, as if you could even have such a thing in these sort of situations. It's I'm going to tell you, management has been done wrong. Like in the last few years, I mean, management has always had a very rough edge to it. I remember growing up, even in some of my earliest jobs when I was growing up as a teenager, I remember having managers that were, kind of into it for the sole purpose that they had a desire to be bossy. They just wanted to be bossy. You know what I mean? And they really believed that this is what it took to be a manager or somebody who could lead people. You know what I mean? And this comes from generational ignorance, okay? Generational ignorance is what it really boils down to. Ignorance and neglect, meaning like, their parents should have told them. But see, their parents didn't know. So like, this is why I'm talking about generational ignorance. People who were not aware of, psychology and understanding human behavior. They may have heard about it, because I know like in the past, a lot of people, were aware of things like psychology. And I know a lot of religious people, unfortunately, would thumb it down, criticize it, minimize it. They've even went so far to say, things like psychology was the work of the devil. But what I find very interesting is that these sort of mind control techniques that they use is in many ways a way of using psychology on people, but using it in a very bad way. So I can see that, because of the self-interest of people who belong to certain Christian organizations, and I'm not going to just say Christian, I'm going to say it can get out of hand with any religious organization, okay? Just like, they were using their self-interest to motivate them to do these, illegal activities. This is just